Hydra Doom in the room as a demo. So I wanted to ask you guys for any pointers of how this could work, how I can set it up.
Okay. I said it to you already, Trim. You're going to be a road man, like a tour manager now.
Yes. Is just pointing out that I was requested yesterday to go to Singapore for Token 2049 to do a demo there of the Hydra Doom thing. So yeah, I'm going to figure out basically the exact same thing that you're figuring out as well, which is probably just spinning it up and playing it locally, so that people can sort of see the game in action and have sort of a Hydra head running on a computer on site. I do think that deploying it locally with the current developer documentation might be a little bit tricky, but I'm sure we can help sort something out.
So can we start by looking at maybe, am I going to need a very powerful machine for the Hydra part, or simple things?
I don't think so. Pi is the one that has been doing the benchmarking for this, but I assume a laptop should work fine, as long as it's not from the 90s.
Yeah.
If you're just running one head, it should be fine. We spun up really big machines because we were running 16 heads, and even that we probably could have gone with much smaller machines than we did. But the Hydra head itself doesn't take up a lot of resources. Usually the expensive piece is the Cardano node, and because of the way that we set it up, we don't, it doesn't use a Cardano node. So.
Okay, cool.
When is this workshop?
This is on September 21st in Lisbon.
Okay.
So I was going to ask exactly to Trim, what's his time frame?
Time frame in terms of what?
In terms of, like you said, trying to set up things and facilitate this for the token 2024. 24 now.
Yeah. So I mean, I already have it set up on my home computer, so I can sort of spin it up on demand. But it did require a little bit of work to get NICs and everything sort of working and running on a Windows computer. So I'm not, confident in my ability to guide someone else through that process.
I was planning to do it over Ubuntu, and I've set up nodes locally in the past. Yeah. So.
What we can do, I would say, is as we have this workshop or this the conference Token 48. Anyway, it's coming up, right? This is the September 16, a couple of days before you, I think, in that same week, but just before. We need to figure out that anyways, and I think it's probably worthwhile to just make sure that we have the documentation ready. You will be facing a similar situation as Trim will be in Singapore, you in Lisbon. Having this Hydra Doom demo available to both of you is something, I guess, the whole team behind Hydra Doom, the Hydra core developers can also help with. And we would be delighted to do so. Or am I wrong, Pi Noon? What do you say?
The only reason I hesitate is because it sounds like literally every single waking moment of the next 2 months is going to be taken up by doing more Hydra Doom stuff. And so I don't know how much of my time I can commit to helping kind of in between now and the summit, which, by the way, Trim, if we don't kind of settle on a scope in the next 24 hours, I don't know if I'm going to be comfortable on this anymore.
No. I 100% agree. And in a couple of hours, I have the meeting with Charles that will finalize, hopefully, everything. So I'll get back to you in a couple of hours.
Yeah.
Okay.
Guys, so just so I don't stand in your way, could you just link me to some repos or some stuff that I can look at for now, and how we can stay in touch, for example, maybe with Sebastian or some channel that I can look at, and that's it for me for today.
Yeah, let's do that. So let's share some links on the chat here. So once we have the Hydra Doom repo itself, I would say the goal should be, and the goal will be for Trim anyways, to have something runnable by himself in Singapore, right? Based on this repository. You should be able to use the same instructions. If it's just about something Hydra Doom, right? I think that will be workable. So this is a starting point. And to stay in touch, I would say, of course, pop in here, or we have other communication channels. They're listed, by the way, on the working group also README. But in fact, it is basically the Ask Hydra on the IoT Discord is one. One, or the Hydra working group on Intersect Discord.
Got it.
This is always hard linked to, right? But these we monitor, we're active on, and I'm at least happy to help because I need to help Trim anyways.
Okay, yeah, I'll keep an eye on it. It's like not the critical thing of the day there, but it would be fun. And so this is just a single old school Doom, and the person plays it by himself. And what actually happens regarding Ada? Just a one-liner. Sorry, guys, I don't want to take your time.
So what you would have is basically a local setup, so that you have the front end, which runs this Doom game. But each move is a transaction which is sent to a Hydra node, which has a Hydra head running, also on your machine where you're demonstrating it in the basic setup. And there is some coordination system in between, which is called this Hydra control plane, which does this assignment to a Hydra head, which was used to scale up in the very eagle demonstration. But you have the basic pieces, the important pieces of a front end running Doom, which does individual frames as transactions in a Hydra head. This is already what the basic setup already has for you.
Okay, I'll read up a bit and I'll stay in touch. Okay, thanks. And yeah, I'll try to come to these calls whenever possible as well.
Yeah, I will make sure to invite you going forward. That basically means what does it mean to be a member? And maybe Sandeep will also want to be one. Oh yeah, now I can mention. So what it means to be a member here, maybe Sandeep also wants to be one, is just to be on an invite list. I would track attendance to keep people invited to join at least every 3 or 4 times. So after not coming 3 times, you won't be invited again, but you can, of course, just join again. We don't have any formal voting so far, and it's more about exchanging thoughts and common topics across Hydra and related catalyst proposals. So we saw things which are building on top of Hydra, Hydra SOA, which is a variant of Hydra. We had other people here from alternative layer 2s, like Midgard, Gummy Worm, like these all in progress layer 2 scaling projects is, I think, a common denominator we have here. So by seeing Pedro here and Sandeep, I'll just find out your email addresses and just keep you invited on this. If you stop joining, you will not be invited in the future again. So
I'll drop my email on the chat, and please call me Lucas. Okay, cheers.
Sorry.
I'll just mute and sit back for now. Just thanks.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah, Mudraf. Yeah, you're too revolutionary, Kenya. That's
it's from the 80s. It's fine. I mean, and also, if we do have time on the next one, I would like to try to present the simulator that I'm building, hopefully.
Oh, very good. So agenda next time, which will be in 2 weeks, a new graph demo simulator. Yeah, and you can hopefully be excited and give some nice feedback.
What does it simulate?
Simulate transactions going from users. It also injects storage problems, and I am working on actually like enforcing problematic threading. So it's like this thread instead of this thread, because it's going to be a little bit hard to get like proper full auditing. So the most tests that you have, the better.
Is it like simulating faults also, or kind of like fault injection?
Right now, it's only simulating
Model-based?
storage failures.
Mhm.
But the idea is to also try replay attacks, double spend attacks, timing attacks, try to mess around with some part of the cryptography and make it fail, hopefully.
Nice. I think you would be setting new standards as early in a project, right? Doing things like this. Welcome to host your demo, definitely.
Yeah, because most of the problems that I had, not only on this project but all of the projects, is that how can you like simulate users, simulate loads, try to get the system in a compromised state where it does not behave like it should. So doing that from the beginning is like very important. Also, I came from banking, so we need to have that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Reminds me a bit of the Tiger Beetle simulation. You know that, guys?
Oh yeah, I watch that like 2-3 times a week. It's important. They have like a 5 hours explanation where they're running the simulator. Yeah. Really good.
So we expect the same, right?
Hopefully. I mean,
joking. Just joking.
Codes is open. I am accepting pull requests. Not yet, but getting close. The idea is that to release version 0.1, which does not connect to Cardano yet, in September 15th, hopefully.
Yeah. Sandeep?
Thank you. Just talking about the simulating of the load and users. I'm working on Cardano autonomous agent testing. Like the use case was 1694 governance, but could also be useful here to test. So basically, like having 1,000 agents as beta holders, say hundreds of DREPs, and then all voting and how the network behaves. That was the core idea. Maybe we could also use it here to test the scalability.
Yeah, please do send the repo link. That would be awesome.
I'll do that. Great.
Okay, I'm just taking some notes on the side. I look non-attentive. That's just because of that. Awesome. Yeah, sharing the love, sharing hints. That's what we do here. Okay. So we got a new idea for next week's 2 weeks agenda. Great. This week was a bit light on the agenda. I would briefly maybe give just 1 or 2 mentions of what's going on the roadmap in case you missed it. Maybe which could be interesting, kind of related to fault injection too. And then we maybe have trim again. Otherwise, of course, I would always love to hear how the list proposals are actually going. I think funds are being distributed. And people get cracking, right?
No funds have been distributed yet.
Okay, so then
we're almost 3 months in.
Oh man, okay, so there is all the reason to not spend too much time on it. Maybe they never pay. Let's see. Quick update also from our side. Happy Cheng, right? We did a release, I think, just about 2 weeks ago. Incremental decommits are released, so we're just about released when we spoke last. We decided to switch. So we have this item switching to Conway, which basically means Hydra will only support, or does also support Conway transactions and all things it can decode from, right? So a ledger used in the Hydra layer 2 will then be a Conway ledger. Doing that switch is this item which is going to be released soon and in an own release, which leaves us then only with another release for the incremental commits. I think last time we spoke about,
right? Because any Babbage transaction can be automatically upgraded to a Conway transaction, so it shouldn't really matter for the end user in a way.
Yes, that's the case. What does matter is that you can use Bluetooth V3 in the off-chain, the layer 2 ledger only once it's, I think only in Conway era, they consider the language version Bluetooth V3, or is it tied to the protocol version? One way or the other, I think right now you couldn't use Conway labeled transactions. Right now, right, this will enable it, and it's backwards compatible to Babbage. That's true. So that's that. The commits is on the way, following a deposit workflow, right? We discussed with George, I believe. And maybe something to mention. We've just been speaking about testing and simulating. So there has been some work by Franco and others on some kind of fault injection testing. We've been using Pumbaa for this. The monthly, which is also published. So if you go here, this recording here also shows a demo of this, and the report talks a bit about it. We've been doing it a very first step to have a fully integrated Hydra nodes setup through Docker, but then faults of network package loss, I think, emulated also through Pumbaa on this Docker network, on the Docker containers. So that has been very nice, and this enables us to explore now also completely different ways of doing networking over than what we have so far, which is quite ad hoc implemented, to be honest. And we've been even exploring some new exciting things, just to give a sneak peek here. Actually, if you would look not on the roadmap, so there has been some more spikes and experiments going on through different ways of networking, different ways of running the off-chain protocols, so some radical experiments maybe, but also running heads in heads, which is maybe relevant for some of you. So this would mean like creating layer 3 heads. Of course, it doesn't go into the direction yet as Hydra will enable, right? Where it's really for virtualizing heads across multiple layer 2 heads. But this one is really just to, if you want to spawn many Hydra heads, which stick to smaller state, for example, running many games on a bigger tournament, as an example, this could be interesting. And this is what we're currently exploring. That's maybe an exciting experiment to kind of learn from everyone here. Too. So there I am. Lost.
One question: is the heading head like PRON, like virtual payment channels?
Yeah, a virtual payment channel would rather be this interhead Hydra concept, which
Gotcha.
is virtual state channel, like specifically made for UTXO state channels, and also the contestation, the dispute, being falling back to yet another head to kind of resolve disputes, is what in a nutshell the internet Hydra protocol is. And yes, Perun is also a state channel protocol.
Yeah,
I think they did integrate with Cardano, but it was quite. I think it was account-based ledgers. So you would open an account-based ledger in one state channel, then you would have yet another one which also has some form of accounting inside, which is a virtual channel across, I think, multiple other, and always pairwise channels, I believe.
gotcha. One small question. Let's say I have like 3 participants on a Hydra head. So if I open an internal Hydra head, could it have different participants?
In general, yes. So the participants is basically the validator set. And just because you have a head secured with like 3 parties doesn't mean all of those 3 need to operate on the next levels again too. You can do a subset, you can do others too. What they need to have is, what they would want to have is some funds in the layer 2, because they need to open the head in the layer 2, which establishes the layer 3. And that means they secure, like open the head means putting down a transaction to initialize it. And then later also, if need be, you need to enforce the state of the layer 3 onto layer 2. So in terms of who validates it, It's not really limited, but the state, of course, what you can put into layer 3 must have been there on the layer 2, which must have been there on the layer 1, right? It further fragments the state, which is the core problem of if you just put layers on top of each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is something which should be and needs to be overcome if this is to be generally useful. You want to make it generally useful.
Yeah, and also this is really good because it allows for things like renting or buying liquidity on already open channels if necessary.
Mm-hmm.
It's awesome.
These kinds of techniques are always possible, I think, on any kind of layer 2, right? I think it starts with how do you can get funds in your layer 2. Either you basically bridge or migrate or lock, whatever you want to call it, things natively into it, or you just ask somebody who already owns something in that ledger, right, and say, hey, can you give it to me? I give you something here on this other network in exchange, right? Or some fiat or whatever. So that kind of thing always exists. We rent out liquidity, you buy liquidity, you on-ramp. I think these are interesting techniques any irrespective of the technology itself would want to employ, right?
Yeah.
As it sidechains, more ephemeral ones especially, the more persistent ones, it's more likely you have something owned on that one big sidechain, right? But if it's not, then you want to have it easily there available.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think we as a community have been relying way too much on things getting on core because Bitcoin has many of the kind of stuff that we are achieving, but they had to do that and fighting Bitcoin at all steps. Like it's good that we are getting that directly on core and everyone can build without having to do like weird distribution networks.
Yeah. What do you mean with like having core? Can you make it the phrase?
Let's say we could already do, in a sense, some similar signatures arrangement to do like a quick, dirty Hydra. But now that we have Hydra, we have smart contract, we have all the guarantees that should be there. But we could do that before. But we are.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's also the idea, right? When this Hydra protocol can be seen as a building block, and to some extent, it is only a building block. It's not an end-to-end solution. It's not a customer-facing solution in and by itself. So, but having this building block, we'll add another one, and we can use it in building applications.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
When you guys don't have any other subject, let's discuss something.
I think this would conclude this kind of brief roadmap updates and current future features spikes discussion agenda items.
Well,
so I think
this kind of segues nicely into the Interhead Hydra discussion that we want to have as well. So,
yeah.
Can we get a quick refresher on how is Interhead Hydra supposed to work? Do we have any of the, well, maybe you know, Sebastian, or some of the researchers are here, maybe on this call?
I don't have any of the researchers on this call right now. I did read the paper like 1 or 2 years back. I didn't prepare for this agenda item. It's not mine. I can answer on the top of my head. And I mean, last time we said we might want to have a discussion offline. We did not have that. But we can maybe use a bit more time this time on this, and maybe use some of the remaining time then for the last agenda item from Trim.
Yeah, I mean, from what I recall, Interhead Hydra is a kind of virtualization of like it sort of takes your L3 idea, right? But then does it not just as a subset of one Hydra head, but kind of bridges over the UTXO state between two Hydra heads, right? So you're kind of locking some funds in one Hydra head, you're locking some funds in another Hydra head in a Hydra-esque kind of contract, right? But you're doing it in a way in which you can, in a virtualized ledger, combine the UTXOs coming from both heads, right? Is that?
Yeah, I would say that's correct. Right? Yeah, Yeah, I think that's correct, right? So it's basically instead of like L3 on just yet the same ledger, it basically takes two ledgers and creates one across. At the basic example, across two heads, you have one virtual head across. You would need to have intermediaries, right, along a path, I would say. So it's very similar to kind of this networking of ledgers together, like Lightning. You would have like a payment across paths, which need to be like evident in one ledger to be used on the next, and basically then back again, right? So the same kind of routing and pathing issue is resolved. It connects multiple ledgers together by having intermediary hops be participating in like a bigger virtual channel across that, right?
Did it have any notion of these hops at all, or was it because my understanding was you establish it and you're basically taking a subset of the union of the participants on the individual heads, right? And those are the people who are going to be running consensus in this virtualized head, right?
Yeah.
But you're not really doing any hops. You're kind of you're creating one virtualized head that bridges over everything, right? So and like the hopping part, you would have to almost decommit from one virtualized head that bridges over, a couple of Hydra heads and bridge it into, or like, deposit it into another virtualized head. So that's been always the question for me. How do we, what kind of scalability properties do we expect for this construct, right? Because for HTLCs, for example, they compose nicely, right? Where you're able to do these hops, so you don't have to deal with this whole like, moving stuff in and out of these L3s that are popping up essentially, right? But for the Interhead Hydra, I get the big advantage there is that you can run smart contracts on it, right? Because it's a full-fledged, virtualized ledger. But on the other hand, you don't have this network hopping, or I think it's more complicated to create that network hopping sort of movement in an Interhead Hydra kind of situation. So how do we expect, what sort of behavior do we expect from this in real life when, we have a whole bunch of Hydra heads and we want to be able to, more freely move funds between them, but also like do it via smart contracts? Like we have to instantiate these virtualized Hydra heads, or are we just agglomerating the whole network of Hydra heads into one gigantic virtualized Hydra head, which is probably infeasible, right? Because your consensus participant set would explode, right? Yeah. Have the researchers or anyone thought about this problem of, okay, yeah, you can connect two Hydra heads, but when you get to n Hydra heads, how do you, make those connections between them?
I think I would say in base, I can definitely agree in that it can become quite complicated, right? Especially as it's the composition there is maybe not as trivial as payments across ledgers using HTLC, as you say. I'm not so worried about the individual the two ledgers or more, to generalize this. But of course, the same problem exists as with any kind of if you have in a Hydra head, we have in theory, it doesn't really matter, right, how many participants you have, right? You're always secure if you're one of them, and basically one honest is enough, right? But in practice, the more you have, the slower it becomes, and the more fragile, failure, likelihood for failure increases, right? Because we need to have more monitored communication necessarily. And this is likely the case too on a virtualized set, right? Where basically you still need to have this off-chain communication. The more participants you have, the less nice it becomes, right?
And it's even more fragile because any of the underlying Hydra heads could collapse. And then what happens to the virtualized head, right? So this scalability problem, I think is the major one that we need to answer, because I've been hearing, so Trim, you've been saying, the plan for 2025, once we have Hydra 1.0, we're going to sort of move towards, Interhead Hydra as the flagship thing that we'll be pursuing, right? But we need to answer.
Not for 2025.
Oh, well, fair enough. But Interhead Hydra looms as this like big flagship, like the next big flagship thing that's going to happen, right? But before we commit to that, we need to understand what, even theoretically, what sort of scalability properties we expect from this thing, right? Because otherwise, if we don't have that answered, we might end up, pursuing the Interhead Hydra path and then not knowing where it really fits within the ecosystem, right?
Yeah, I think this maybe actually segues us quite naturally into the next part, which is the 2025 roadmap, or the sort of future of Hydra roadmap items. So yes, it is really important to figure out these things. Is it even remotely possible? Even if it is possible, does it make sense to do it? There's a lot of questions that, especially from a practical sort of deployment angle, like, are we making too many assumptions, or these questions. So basically what I've planned to propose so far is to have Sebastian work on a moonshot item, which is investigating and prototyping in towards the Interhead Hydra, not with the intention of reaching it within 2025, because that's completely unrealistic, but to validate, is this possible? Does it make sense? How would we even go about doing it if it is possible, right? With that being a sort of low priority item that can be put down in response to any support requests or any other sort of things that take precedent. While that's going on, would you mind pulling up the chart, Sebastian? So
what exactly you want to show?
The constellation map. Yeah.
Which contains, we had this one, by the way, already last week. Because you would find that picture back here, right? So that thing here.
Yes. Yeah. So I think I already posted a brief rundown of my thinking here in the special interest group chat on scaling in the Intersect Discord server, right? So I don't fault anyone who's not read that, because there's so many threads, servers, channels, whatever, right? So but in broad strokes, the whole constellation map sort of starts at the left side with the current Hydra head. It ends, if you will, on the right side with the sort of quote unquote full Hydra vision, which includes the Hydra head with virtual heads, interhead communications, a lot of different things.
If I may, this should rather be like labeled you might have seen the video from Agelos, right? This kind of vision of scalability on Cardano, right? Which not only includes these particular layer 2, but also some layer 2. But in the end, it's going to be a heterogeneous thing, right? There's some things which are better for one use case than others. So it's not only a Hydra vision, it's an overall scalability vision for Cardano, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. But with the likes of partner chains, and there are other solutions that don't quite naturally fit into this picture. But the sort of lower parts of this diagram pertain to a different type of protocol, the Hydra tail, which if you look at it, however sort of specified it is, it's more similar to roll-up solutions like optimistic and ZK rollups in function. So rather than compete to make a similar product that solves more or less the same problem, my thinking was we can collaborate with existing rollup like solutions like Midgard, like the ZK rollup thing that the ZK Fold team are working on, and any sort of other solution that fits the bill for in place of the Hydra tail protocol. And then for the Hydra team to focus on the top part of this diagram, sort of going from left to right. There's a couple of different options there as well, but I do think that the ones that are sort of darkish green in the top left corner, they pertain to, if we implement them, we will essentially reach something similar to feature parity with the Bitcoin network, which means that we can start spinning up, this sort of payment network, which can be pretty useful. Like it's a massive use case for the Bitcoin network already. I do think that at least reaching this point might be quite useful for Hydra, and since we already have smart contract capabilities inside of these nodes and multi-participant state channels, we will sort of, if we reach feature parity, we will already have exceeded the capabilities of the Bitcoin network. And this will sort of help us establish a network that we can then maybe leverage for future applications that are built on this, and sort of the continued roadmap after this point. And then, with the moonshot item of moving towards the interhead Hydra, if that is possible and makes sense, we can start combining these things. And once Midgard and the other sort of roll-up solutions are deployed, stable, and in a good state, we can start thinking about integration, and that's sort of when the sort of loop or the diagram closes in a way. So the green items in that we just discussed, the sort of reaching feature parity with the Bitcoin network, more or less, is what I propose as a slightly ambitious goal for 2025, and then with the rest of this being the overall goal. So yeah, rant over. I see you have your hand up, Nud.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask just a quick question. Actually, I think it's George's question from earlier. I was just curious, just about that intra-Hydra head. Has that been done by researchers? Did you answer that, Sebastian? I don't recall.
And there is a research paper, right, which kind of explores this, like the basic idea, and this has been not new, not novel, right? Kind of, if you have a state channel, you can make virtual state channels, which kind of bridge multiple of these state channels together to basically reuse existing off-chain infrastructure for even more off-chain, now a direct kind of ledger between individual endpoints, right? And this is what Kanya also mentioned with Perun. Perun is an example of that, an implementation mostly from the Ethereum, Polygon, and these other kinds of similar networks. There's also papers on Perun, but all of those kind of go back to this kind of virtual state channel project from Dzimbowski. Dzimbowski is the name of the research group professor somewhere in Germany, Darmstadt, I believe. And I linked also in the chat the Concrete Internet Hydra paper, which basically explored that, right? So, and here the notable difference between what Internet Hydra is to a virtual state channel protocol is all of this is based on UTXOs and not on like account state, which is the traditional thing of a state channel. You have basically just some Merkle tree which contains all the account state, right? Which you just put into such a channel, and then you do things, and then you integrate it back, and how that kind of works out. And in our case, it's really UTXOs which are captured into the head, and the level of ledger is different basically. And some of these things would allow maybe a slightly different way of enforcing the state and make sure that things are combinable after the fact, right? So which is not true in principle on an account-based ledger, because the state is like global there.
But let me ask George's quick. Maybe George, you want to clarify, but I'll try one more time to ask you a question in a different way, which is just, is the kind of those questions George were asking about, like, oh, well, what if nodes go offline and like we lose all the money and whatnot? Like, has all that analysis been done as well, or not? It hasn't been done. Or that I guess what I'm wondering then is, if that hasn't been done, is it worth doing that before trying to implement it? I think that, George, that was your question. Correct me if I'm wrong.
It was kind of my question, but I think like I saw some of the there is a security section in the Interhead Hydra paper, and they did go over some of the some of those basic questions about what can happen, what can go wrong with, between the two Hydra heads that are being connected by this Interhead. And I think some of the properties that they proved there in the security section are quite satisfactory. I'm not sure if it covers everything. I didn't think about it as extensively as that, but it seems to be like a reasonable thing. My question pertains more to, okay, if we want to expand beyond simply connecting two Hydra heads, if we're trying to, use this construct across the network and hopefully to enable a freedom of funds moving across the network, not just via signature-based schemes like HTLC, but also through smart contract schemes. How scalable is this construct really? Would it meet the needs of a network that is trying to have free flow funds via smart contract like mechanisms, right? And my suspicion is that at least in the way that Interhead Hydra is constructed right now, probably not, because the overhead of constructing more and more of these Interhead Hydra and either doing hops or just agglomerating bigger and bigger virtualized ledgers, it probably reaches some bottlenecks pretty quickly, right? So that's my fear with this Interhead Hydra approach.
Yeah.
But I guess it's useful to at least prototype and quantify some of these bottlenecks so that we have more information about it, right? And then we can target the bottlenecks more specifically. Like similar to how we did with, once we had an implementation of Hydra, we saw that, a big bottleneck was collect commits. So now we know, okay, well, direct head open kind of addresses that, right? So perhaps the prototyping that might get done in 2025 might shed a clearer light on where those bottlenecks lie, and then we can target them more precisely with our optimizations.
And just to be clear, I'm also quite fearful of like the whole like routing, bookkeeping ultimately of the kind of these many virtual heads and all this kind of state management. And I mean, we should not really just look at, oh yeah, Bitcoin Lightning is a great thing, right? Or virtual trade channels, it just works for others. There has been real problems with these kinds of solutions too in other ecosystems, right? With Lightning, it is the liquidity is not so, needs to be rebalanced and so on, needs to be managed, right? This is like enabling payments to be routed is not the end of the game, it's the start of the game actually, right? And there the whole complexity only starts. And similar nature, but just maybe an order of magnitude more complicated, could be, is really the bookkeeping between like all these heads, right? Keeping the overview and making, would this even be practical at one point is, that resonates well with me, right, George? I'm also kind of, I don't know, right? I just see somebody thought about at least it's doable, right? I know that for real, that anytime when we put something off chain, capture something into another ledger, right? It's limited in its reach. Can this be overcome somehow by a quite flexible way of creating these virtualized ledgers, right? To kind of create these more fluid ways of expressing things again, and I would say 50-50, right? Not if even, it could actually just be, no, we realize it's not the way, right? We just explore it and we find, no, this is just, we didn't find a satisfying answer to really load a full team on it, like a full year or a couple of years process, right? So I think that's also why it is utopic to kind of say, yeah, we're going down virtual state channels right away because we see a definite need for it and also the direct application and its feasibility. This is not the case, and we need to find out whether it's even feasible, that's even a good idea, and we need to find good stepping stones into this direction. I think relying a bit on.
Wait, can I ask? Oh, sorry. Can you say?
Yeah, no, go ahead. It's just.
I was just gonna like. I think good to find feasibility and whatnot. But do we know of someone that also concretely wants to use it?
You mean the capabilities that Interhead Hydra might bring?
Suppose,
yeah. It would be. So the huge advantage, if we are able to solve the scalability problem, is that you would be able to run smart contracts across Hydra heads, which would be a pretty big win for the whole isomorphism property, because right now If we only connect Hydra heads with HTLCs, the most you can do is just transfer some funds from one Hydra head to another, but that's only signature based in a sense, right? You can only send from one person to another person, as a payment. Whereas if you had a full-fledged virtualized ledger, you could actually run a dApp spread across multiple Hydra heads, with fairly nice behavior in a way, right? Like you could spread out a liquidity pool or something for a DEX or something across multiple Hydra heads and benefit from the fast transaction speed, while at the same time the decentralization of the dApp being controlled by smart contracts as opposed to by specific signers, right? So like the potential benefits are there. It's just the question is, are we able to attain them with the full flexibility of a scalable mechanism that allows us to bridge over not just signature based stuff, but like smart contract based stuff across the Hydra head network? And that's the big open question in my mind.
Totally. What I maybe mean is like you've described a particular thing to do, but is there like an actual human being that wants to do that, or is it you yourself, or are there other people? Like I'm just wondering, like, is there someone genuinely that is sitting there waiting at their keyboard, like ready to type, and we just need to give them this program, and because then they'd give us like lots of feedback.
I mean, yeah, personally, I'm going to give a very unoptimistic take about state channels. In basically every other ecosystem, we have yet to see a single successful state channel in terms of adoption. And that's because just working with them requires different architectures and different paradigms, and they're not really suited for activities that people like to do on chain, which are things like DeFi protocols, as opposed to like they're very good at their niche, which is these peer-to-peer transfers and business-to-business transfers and micropayments. But these things are just not frequent use cases of crypto. So yeah, from my perspective, the answer is really no.
I just wanted to shoot in a little thing as well. One of the use cases that we haven't really, because it's not a hugely popular thing in terms of Web3 purity, but in terms of usability and user experience, it might actually be and market size, I suppose, it might be an attractive market that we're not really thinking about at the moment, is licensed entities moving sort of purely traditional Web2 activities into a intermediary state where it's not completely decentralized, fully permissionless, whatever. It's operated maybe by someone who has virtual asset service provider licenses or similar sort of setups, and they're offering services to users that are sort of adding some of the features of Web3 in terms of self-custody of funds. You can actually own the UTXOs containing the assets that you have, stuff like that. And it's operated in this way where it's okay, it's centrally operated, but they assuming they're licensed entities, it is still a step in the right direction in terms of using a fully centralized exchange, which is what most people use most of the time anyway, right? So I do think that in this sort of more corporate, maybe, you can argue that it's a B2C, but I can also see an argument that it's not. Sort of landscape. I imagine there are a lot of applications which, again, if you compare it to a order book style DEX on Cardano with no sort of central operators, then of course it's a step in the wrong direction. But if you compare it to perpetual derivative trading on Bybit, then it's a step in the right direction, right? So
I'm not arguing about merit. Like, I'm not saying there's not use cases. I'm just saying from objectively looking at the data of, are people using state channels? The answer currently is no, right? And that's something that Hydra has to change. And
Bitcoin Lightning is being used all over the place, right?
No, not. It really. I mean, if you look at Bitcoin Lightning compared to like any other layer 2 solution, the TVL is like 1/1 millionth. If you look at, I mean, even Base itself has more volume in a single week than Bitcoin Lightning has in the past 6 months. And it's the same with like Plasma, which, you know, Kai and I understand what your comment as well. But Plasma is pretty far advanced. I mean, at this point, like $3 or $4 million of R&D over the past, you know, year for for the past 3 years. You know, it's pretty sufficiently advanced. They have smart contracts, and I'm not saying this to be like a downer and say Hydra sucks. My point is that, you know, we need to figure out what's wrong with others, and we need to make sure that, you know, we change those things with Hydra to get it to a point where people want to use it, or, you know, trim the use cases that you suggest. We need to then, you know, focus in on those and provide more tooling around those use cases and push people towards that direction, so that they don't then try to use it for like a DEX and then give up after, you know, a month because it's an awful experience.
Yeah, no, exactly. And sorry to, I don't want to cut you off, Kaina, but just to sort of add 2 cents to that, it's I do think that Hydra has unique properties that these other systems don't, in terms of, you know, the local state and the actual presence of smart contracts, that sort of makes it distinguished from Plasma and from Lightning. We just need to really tap into that and showcase it, right? Like make it real for people and make it available for use. So again, one thing that I didn't mention in my little spiel about the roadmap, one of the or essentially what I'm hoping to pitch is a 2-part approach. One of which is purely continued development of the core protocol, which is what I discussed earlier, adding, you know, these new features. And the other one is more or focused purely basically on facilitating adoption and deployment of use cases. So at the moment, I have a list of use cases, and, you know, sort of still in a slightly rough state, but it can be refined list of possible products that could be developed and deployed reasonably quickly, that showcase those use cases and prospective partners that might want to use them and that might be able to build them. And the second part of the roadmap proposal that I'm going to submit as well is all about, you know, or setting up something like a grant program or a fund or anything that sort of puts money into the hands of the builders that are able to take some of these use cases and deploy them reasonably quickly. Because I know there's a real opportunity cost for the builders that are able to do this stuff. And there's, you know, a risk involved with all of this. So having something like a funding mechanism that, you know, allows them to take on that risk without, you know, the opportunity cost outweighing the possible benefits, I think will help bring these things into production so that projects can start using these products. There are a couple of very simple wins, you know, tipping bots, small, you know, betting stuff, pay per X platforms. There's a lot of different use cases that I think are reasonably easy to make into products pretty quickly. So that's the second sort of part of what I really want to propose. And, you know, in reality, all of those funds that are requested in that second part is probably going to go to the builders that are in this call, right? Because you're the ones that are able to do something like that. So it may be in collaboration with a different project that want to use or launch this product, and then built by the builders that are able to. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that as well.
So yeah, my counterpoint to Philip is that I have been trying for the past few years to actually buy and use crypto for stuff, and not only to make numbers go up. And honestly, there are only 2 of those that are even worth to be considered to be used for anything other than investment, which is Monero and the Lightning Network. Monero mostly because of privacy, and Lightning Network because it's the only one that actually supports payments in a reasonable way for the users. So yeah, I think that this space is wide open, waiting for solutions that are
I'm
much
only
better.
talking about the data, the objective data in terms of TVL, right? If you show me there's TVL on those networks compared to Base or Arbitrum, then I'll totally agree. But right now, just statistics, just don't show this. Right?
I'm talking payments. TVL is mostly DeFi, and DeFi, I would say, has much different timing requirements than what, let's say, payments do. You're not doing any HFT.
Right, but the reason that this volume is important, right, is because that's what's generating protocol revenue. So, like the metric that everyone is looking for is volume, right? And if you look at Base's volume compared to Lightning, or even revenue generated compared to Lightning, you'll see it's just getting murdered. And I'm not saying like, oh, it's done. I'm just saying like it needs to be considered, and a solution needs to be created for this, right? If everyone wants to do DeFi and we're saying, okay, well, this is just for payments, then there's a problem, right? Because the main use case currently, at least in terms of external interest, is DeFi.
Yeah, but at the same time, you're kind of checking the requirements for building a bridge by counting the number of people that are swimming to the other side. People are not going to use anything for payments if it doesn't work well. So
yeah, I think
they're just outside of the market.
It's a nice analogy. I think there's always these two things, right? Either you build something which scales the current traffic, or you build something which enables other traffic which hasn't been there, right? I think maybe this has been, but I really are sympathetic to Phil's point, right? We need to look at the data, and of course, but we also need to take it with a grain of salt too. And yeah, I love the conversation so far. So maybe we can continue. Sasha, you have a hand raised?
Yeah, I wanted just to add, like, maybe we just need to work with the wallet developers, and then if users don't care where their money is, either layer 1 or layer 2, maybe it would bring more sort of sense of security, and maybe they would use these protocols more, in a sense that if you know that you can always get your data back and do whatever you want, it would sort of make you feel more comfortable using Hydra or whatever other layer 2 protocol there is. That's just my take on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from one aspect, yeah, I'm conscious of maybe, payments. Crypto is not used for payments a lot. And I think, I'm not even sure if we are the people to change it, or we are having the right people in the room to change it, because not only a technology problem, right, that maybe we don't use ADA for paying our everyday stuff, right? Because there's a much more
maybe that's because we don't have a good payment method, right? And those kind of points.
Yeah, maybe, but maybe also, I mean, just making the technology possible to do it, right, is not the end of it. It will not automatically make it happen. And there are some big problems for like using like a very decentralized network like Cardano for payments, because it has probabilistic consensus, or it kind of, it's not final at the moment. There is some kind of things to consider which make it a bit impractical for that, right? And there has been, and why does Bitcoin Lightning exist? Because just fees were very high on Bitcoin. Also, like latency is very long, right? And this makes it impossible to use it for payments. But with things like payment channels, this can be overcome, but only technically. There is still this, and this is where Phil is right? Bitcoin Lightning is not as predominant as sometimes we would want to believe, right? But like, then again, right, trading and lending and whatever we do on DeFi is also not so predominant with like the average Joe either. The swimmers, right? But the swimmers are not the default going over a bridge. Phil?
Well, the problem, Bitcoin Lightning has huge barriers to entry, right? Because getting incoming liquidity is very, very hard. You need to have a counterparty, right? Because all the channels are pairwise. Your counterparty's capacity, or like deposit, is essentially your incoming capacity. you can create outgoing capacity very easily by just, you put in more money into the state channel, right? But getting more incoming capacity is very hard, which is, I think, a big reason why people struggle to, users struggle to use Bitcoin Lightning, and what's been holding it back. One of the advantages we have with Hydra, because is that in a multi-channel or multi-party state channel, your incoming capacity is the sum of the deposits of all your counterparties, right? So I think potentially, if Hydra, the multi-party channel-based approach, implements the same sort of payment network as Hydra, or sorry, as Lightning, we may potentially have a much better story for incoming capacity, and the barrier to entry for users might be significantly reduced in that sense.
My issue here is there's no value capture, right? So when you have an L2, there's value capture by the node network. And that's why these L2s raise and bring in huge amounts of external capital and contribute to the layer one. With large VC rounds, which wind up in, hundreds of, years of engineering hours and effort put into scaling the chains. But when you look at something like Hydra, right, you're multi-signing between these participants, and no one is benefiting from it, which from a user perspective, like if you're doing this peer-to-peer payment scheme, it's great for the users, right? But the economic incentive on the other end isn't there as strongly as it is for something like a DApp, right? A DeFi protocol or an L2, right? Because a DApp wants to there's huge incentive to drive up revenue and user engagement because that's the value capture. But anyway, totally aside the point, my point is, okay, I agree with you guys that, there's never been a good payment channel or state channel solution. Although I do think you guys are underappreciating Plasma. It's quite advanced. I think you should give it a go before dismissing it. But on the other hand, if payments is what we want to do, I think then we need to really focus on payments and stop working on other things until payments is completely done and the additional utilities and support is there, right? Like the design patterns, instead of like all this delegated Hydra head design patterns and like the auction-based solutions and things like that, the real, examples and design patterns and tooling should all facilitate then the direct state channel payment use case.
In a sense, I would say two things. The first of them is that there are way too many different ways of making money, and running infrastructure is pretty cheap compared to the kind of service that you can offer to people. The second thing is that, in a sense, the traditional banking system, and also is the way that they're used to do things, is already built on a form of like informal state channels. And I think that they are going to have scalability properties that are much different than L2s and much preferable for that kind of company. If you're doing really heavy enterprise, if you're doing HFT, that kind of stuff cannot be on the blockchain. As experience of work at CloudWalk, and we had 400,000 users. And we started on Ethereum for some reason, then we went to Polygon, then we had to just bring an EVM compatible thing. And none of them like handle it well at all, because everything still relies on global consensus. So if you're doing channels, we have much more flexibility.
Okay. People are leaving anyways, so maybe we should wrap this up. I took some notes, and I probably didn't faithfully capture everything. I need to hear back the recording. I would like to thank the active discussion again, and maybe we should make an agenda item out of this next time, really, right? Maybe bring in some more like background info in between for individuals. Any pointers you could raise? We should look maybe a bit into Plasma, and there has been this one blog article. I need to find back like why Plasma failed, right? Something like this, that way. which should be a warning, right? And I think there was also this payment channel on Ethereum, which is kind of Raiden, so Lightning for Ethereum, basically. And similar things, like, right, initially even we said, is it like Perun, right? Okay, where is Perun situated? How does it work? Is it successful? I think not closing our eyes from it is good. And in the end users don't usually care too much about how decentralized it is, as long as it's fast and cheap. And the big problem with like having small peer-to-peer, non-custodial, everyone's equal, symmetric protocols, these things like payment channels, state channels, just makes it hard to kind of organize in a way as a nice user experience for users, such that they have all these benefits, and at the same time, users don't really care too much about it in the end, which is sad, but that's the truth. And there is maybe simpler solutions to just have this on board from Web 2 into Web 3, and to some level decentralization, but not too much. I'm also conscious of, right, this is also why you believe in, like, I think you're building a more or a less peer-to-peer, more like one big optimized rollup, or like optimistic rollup, Phil, right? So, and on the other hand, kind of you have this very lightweight, small, like check-based minting project. So I see the positions, and that's I love it that we have this discussion, really.
Yeah, it's a trade-off. I offer some anonymity, and you guys offer isomorphism.
Yeah, and Phil offers like great UX because it's a one-stop shop, right? You just need to have support for one of these off-chain things, and you don't need to find your head and where is your balance. And this is a spectrum ultimately, and but I think the ground truth, and this is maybe noon, I would invite you to be vigilant now also within the team, the concrete next steps, work items. What's the use case, right? And maybe keep focus. I think that is values we seem to agree on better than how it's done. That's secondary. Keep the use case in focus. We can agree on more easily.
For sure.
Okay, so I think that would be it for today.
Just one thing that is on chat. Sorry. Can you put a point for the next one for us? It's because bridging between Hydra and Lightning, because I've been getting some seems heavy interest, and I think that this is a good place to collaborate with other chains, especially CKB, which it does layer 2 for Bitcoin, and they want to have Lightning integration with other state channel systems, and that also can bring us runes, Taproot assets, BRC20s, and so on.
Yeah, so this is the runes and Taproot and everything. This is the Bitcoin complexity, right? And we just have native assets, and this is maybe like a nice selling point. Basically, anything which is in the ledger is also available in the off-chain, right? Yeah, so did you say next agenda item also for next time, interoperability with Lightning, basically, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. That's very good. I'll put it on the prepared meeting notes, and you're definitely interested in, probably others too. Let's try to communicate it a bit upfront, and next time is going to be exciting again. Thanks for coming, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks for taking the time to talk with us. See you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.